I'm Matt Brown from Alaskan Bush People, and I have a hidden talent you might not know about. I juggle.
Shocking revelations are emerging as Bear Brown finally breaks his silence about Matt Brown's heartbreaking final moments. Behind the headlines that has kept fans hooked is a story filled with unanswered questions, emotion, and unexpected twists that fans had no idea was happening. So, what really happened in Matt Brown's final hours? And why are some people questioning details that are only now coming to light? Join us as we uncover Bear Brown's emotional account, explore the mystery surrounding Matt's tragic death, and reveal the details that have everyone talking. The eldest son of Browntown. Matt Brown was the original poster child for this whole circus before everything went downhill. As the oldest of the 7 Brown kids, he was front and center when Alaskan Bush People debuted back in 2014. The network sold a massive fantasy. Television executives convinced millions of viewers that a random family was successfully surviving deep in the freezing wilderness, completely cut off from civilization, in a place normal people would avoid at all costs. In the early seasons, Matt had to play the mature one. As the oldest, the job of keeping his younger siblings from accidentally taking themselves out while trying to build a shack in the woods fell on him. He managed to survive 79 episodes over 5 years, and he was basically the only reason the show had any rhythm. Viewers actually bought into his routine because he seemed like a real person instead of a cartoon character. While the rest of the kids bickered and acted goofy for the cameras, Matt had to act like the responsible adult who actually understood the absolute madness of the lifestyle their dad forced them into. The Browns became an unlikely television phenomenon. The show ran for season after season and turned a relatively unknown family into household names, complete with their own slang, their own legends, and their own devoted fan base. Critics often questioned how real any of it actually was, and there were always rumors that the wilderness lifestyle was more performance than reality. But fans did not care. They loved the Browns, and many of them loved Matt most of all. The family's whole brand was built on the idea that they only needed each other, that out there in the wild, blood was the one thing you could count on. The whole selling point of the show was the idea that this family would never turn on each other. People did not just watch for the sketchy survival stunts. They watched because they fell for the wholesome family act. The audience watched these kids grow up on camera, fight over nonsense, and make up just in time for the commercial break. Viewers loved the idea of a family refusing to split up. And since Matt was the oldest, everyone expected him to take over the family business of being eccentric on television. Off camera, the situation was a disaster compared to the tidy version edited for TV. The reliable older brother act was just for show. In reality, he was dealing with serious personal problems that had absolutely nothing to do with wild animals, snowstorms, or chopping down trees. Surviving in the woods was the simple part of the gig. The real struggle was happening in his own head, and the millions of people watching from their couches were completely oblivious. It is funny how a network can edit out severe personal crises, but manages to spend 10 minutes of airtime focusing on a broken chainsaw. What the cameras captured was only half the story, and the other half was about to change everything. The struggle the show could not hide. Despite the fame and the network money, Matt Brown was dealing with a massive drinking problem that dragged him down for years. He eventually admitted to his alcoholism, and this problem became impossible for the producers to hide as the show kept going. What began as a disaster eventually became his entire identity online, and viewers started putting the pieces together whenever he vanished from the screen. In 2016, Matt reportedly entered treatment for the first time, stepping away from the spotlight to focus on his recovery. He later spoke about gaining a new perspective on life after completing a long stretch in rehab, talking about turning weakness into strength and finding his way back after getting lost. For a while, it seemed like he might be turning a corner. Fans wanted to believe it. His family wanted to believe it too. There was real hope that the worst was behind him. Recovery is rarely a clean process, and his path was messy. There were multiple stints in rehab, constant relapses, and countless moments where all his hard work just fell apart. The guy who used to look like the only sane adult on the show was completely falling apart behind the scenes. Every single piece of progress he made was immediately canceled out by another disaster, leaving everyone around him waiting for the next hit. Reality TV production companies love to film a struggle, but they rarely know what to do when the cameras stop rolling and the actual damage sets in. By 2019, Matt was completely done with Alaskan bush people. He walked away from the show entirely, and the gap between him and the production crew quickly turned into a massive divide. Leaving the show was just the start of a brutal falling out, because he did not just cut ties with the network. He supposedly stopped talking to his actual family, too. The television fame vanished, replaced by a much more isolated existence far away from the cameras. Instead of being surrounded by siblings, producers, and millions of fans, he was stuck by himself in a quiet room with nothing but his own bad habits to keep him company. The brother fan remembered was slowly disappearing from view, and what replaced him was a silence that would last for years. A family torn apart. One of the saddest pieces of Matt's story is how far he allegedly drifted from the family that built its entire identity around togetherness. Fans assumed the Browns had turned their backs on him. The reality, according to his own siblings, was reportedly the opposite. Matt was the one who pulled away. His brother Bear later explained that people had it wrong. The family had not shunned Matt, Bear said, and Matt simply did not want anything to do with them anymore. He isolated himself, cutting ties with the people who had once been his entire world. For a clan that had survived the wilderness by sticking together, this kind of separation was almost unthinkable. These were people who had built homes side by side, hunted together, and weathered Alaskan winters as a single unit. To have one of their own choose to disappear was a wound that never fully closed. Reports suggest that only one sibling, Gabe, kept any actual contact with Matt during his final years, and even those conversations were rare. The rest of the family was completely shut out. They were left to stress out from a distance about a brother who clearly did not want to be found. They could not force him to talk to them. They could only wait around and hope he would eventually change his mind. It is funny how a family can spend years pretending to survive the harsh wilderness together on camera, but a simple phone call is where they completely lose the plot. Bear has spoken about how their own relationship faded into the occasional phone call. He recalled trying to encourage Matt to stay sober, to keep fighting, to get back up whenever he stumbled. He remembered seeing his brother only briefly, reportedly running into him for just a few minutes at a Walmart. And he remembered a final phone call where Matt admitted he had fallen off the wagon again. Bear reportedly told him what he always told him: to get back on, that everybody falls, that he could fight his way through it as he had so many times before. That conversation, fans would later learn, carried a weight no one could have predicted at the time. The final weeks that worried everyone. In the spring of 2026, the warning signs reportedly began to surface in public. Matt had taken to streaming himself online, and in May, a live stream he posted on YouTube allegedly alarmed many of the people watching. Something seemed off. Fans who had followed his journey for years grew concerned, and the conversations around him took a darker, more anxious turn. For a family that had largely lost touch with him, these public glimpses were reportedly the only window into how Matt was really doing. And what they saw was not reassuring. The man on screen seemed to be struggling, and the distance that had kept his loved ones away suddenly felt more dangerous than ever. People who cared about him reportedly tried to reach out, but the gap that had grown over the years was not easy to close in a moment. Some fans reportedly grew so worried that they began talking openly about whether someone needed to step in, sensing that the situation was spiraling toward something serious. It is exactly the kind of situation that leaves people feeling guilty after the fact. The warning signs were all over his live streams and comment sections for anyone actually paying attention, but he had shut everyone out so completely that the red flags did not matter. The total isolation he chose for his final years made it pretty much impossible for anyone to step in and stop the downward spiral. People love to say the signs were there after a disaster happens, but the truth is that nobody is actively monitoring a reality star's social media feed for a cry for help until it is already too late. Then the situation turned into exactly what everyone was dreading. In late May, Matt went missing near the Okanagan River in Washington state. A random bystander reported seeing a guy sitting in the shallow water, but when they turned around, he was floating face down and drifting away in the heavy current. The police showed up and started a massive search operation, turning a private family concern into an immediate emergency. It is wild how a person can spend years surviving engineered television drama in the wilderness, only to have reality catch up to them in a completely ordinary river. The Brown family, despite the years of estrangement, was said to be gripped with fear. Bear shared an early video telling fans he had received some really bad news, though he was careful to say he could not yet confirm everything as 100% true. He spoke about people spotting Matt near the river and about reports that his brother had been seen in the water at one point. He said the family was hearing the worst and that searchers were doing everything they could. The family braced itself for an outcome it did not want to imagine. And the worst, tragically, was exactly what was coming. The day the search ended. The search for Matt Brown was reportedly not a large official operation with hundreds of responders. It was, in large part, carried out by volunteers, a small group of people who cared, organized through social media, scouring a remote and difficult stretch of river that was not easy for law enforcement to reach. The terrain was rough, the water was dangerous, and the odds felt heavy from the start. One volunteer who helped coordinate the effort reportedly expressed surprise at how few people stepped forward to help, given Matt's reality television fame. He had been seen by millions on television, yet when it mattered most, the search reportedly came down to a handful of determined souls. But those who did show up were said to have loved him deeply, and they pushed on through the difficult conditions, refusing to give up until they brought him home. On May 30th, 2026, that long and painful search came to an end. A volunteer group reportedly located Matt's body in the Okanagan River. Among those at the scene was his younger brother Noah, who had joined the search himself. And in the most heartbreaking moment imaginable, it was Noah who positively identified his oldest brother, pulling him from the water and confirming the loss the family had been dreading. Noah later shared that he had identified Matthew himself, calling him his oldest brother and confirming the death publicly. The recovery was reportedly difficult and dangerous, with rescuers having to take great care to bring him out of the water safely in such a remote location. After years of distance and silence, the family's worst fear had finally become real, and the search that had started in desperate hope ended in unimaginable grief. For Noah, the burden was almost unthinkable. Of all the ways to confront the loss of a brother, being the one to find him and name him is a memory no person should ever have to carry. And yet, he reportedly stepped up to do exactly that. Now it would fall to Bear to tell the world what had happened, and the way he chose to do it would touch millions. Bear breaks the news to the world. Bear Brown was the one who ended up breaking the news by posting a video on TikTok that immediately went viral. He looked completely wrecked on camera. He told viewers that the search team found a body in the water and confirmed it was Matt. Apparently, Noah was the sibling who had to go handle the formal identification process. There was no PR team polishing the statement or hiding the mess. It was just a guy on his phone trying to explain that his brother was dead. Using TikTok to announce a family tragedy is peak modern reality television, ensuring the algorithm gets its cut of the grief before the funeral is even planned. Bear was honest about how blindsided he felt. He said he never imagined his brother would hurt himself. He had worried about Matt for years, he admitted, but his fears had always been about the addiction, about the possibility of an accidental overdose, not about this. The reality of what reportedly happened left him struggling to make sense of it, openly admitting he had never thought it would come to this. According to Bear, the injury appeared to be self-inflicted, and the family came to understand the death as a suicide. He spoke about his brother's long struggle, about the isolation, about the painful distance that had grown between Matt and the people who loved him. He framed it not as a family that had given up, but as a brother who had slowly slipped beyond their reach, no matter how often they tried to pull him back. Then Bear did something that revealed the kind of person he is. He pleaded with the public to be kind. He asked people to be respectful to his family, and especially to his mother, Ami, who had now lost a son. He reminded everyone that words can cut deeper than fists, and he begged the internet to think before leaving cruel comments on a grieving family's darkest day. He noted that even before this, plenty of negative comments had piled up around Matt online, and he asked people to stop. His words were a reminder that behind the reality, television fame were real people, and one of them was now gone forever. The video reportedly spread fast, shared and reshared across platforms as fans tried to process the loss. For many viewers, Matt had been part of their living rooms for years, a familiar face from a show they had grown up watching. The grief that poured out online was, for a lot of people, surprisingly personal, the kind reserved for someone they felt they actually knew. But Matt was not the first member of the Brown family that fans had been forced to say goodbye to. Family that has known too much loss. For longtime fans, Matt's death reportedly carried an extra layer of heartbreak because the Brown family had walked this road before. This was not the first time tragedy had struck Browntown, and the wounds from the last loss had barely begun to heal. In 2021, the family's patriarch, Billy Brown, died after suffering a seizure. He was 68 years old. Billy had been the heart of the show, the dreamer who had led his family into the wilderness in the first place, and his sudden passing devastated the Browns and their fans. Bear was among those who shared the painful news at the time. The family called him their best friend and the reason they had the life they did, mourning him as the trailblazer who had shaped everything they were. Now, just a few years later, the family had to deal with the death of the oldest son. He was only 43 years old when he passed away. The same group that made millions of dollars pretending to be a tight-knit survivalist clan had to face another round of grief. Only this time, the whole situation was buried under years of family drama, complete silence, and unanswered questions. There was absolutely no opportunity left to fix the relationships that had been ruined, no big family reunion for the television cameras, and no clean closure. There is a cruel irony in it all. A family famous for living off the land, for facing down nature and hardship together, was brought to its knees not by the wilderness, but by the personal battles that played out away from the cameras. Matt survived the Alaskan bush. So what really happened to Matt Brown in those final days? Was this a tragedy that might have been prevented, or a battle no one could win? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.